You were the leader in the talks from September
Well, that's very kind
'97.
of you,
Well,
Bertie, but
I was back in Dublin.
yeah, I know that. Well, first of all, it was a huge honour that you'd given me. There's no doubt about that. And when you look back, you think that if there was one thing over a long political career, I was a TD for 38 years in Dunleary, and I'd say it was the Good Friday Agreement was, of all the things I did, and I did many things, was the greatest, without any doubt whatever. And if I may sort of go to the end and come back and reflect on who were the best negotiators in the Good Friday Agreement, I would say yourself and Blair, Martin McGuinness, and Seamus Mallon. They were the top negotiators, without any doubt whatever. I got on very well with Seamus Mallon. He was a pal of mine, on the basis that we were fly fishermen, and we used to fly fish, but we used to fly fish down in the west. Mitchell had huge regard for Mallon, no doubt about it. And Martha Pope, of course, was Mitchell's private secretary. And whilst Paisley wasn't in the talks, he was nevertheless at the bottom of the. He was nevertheless shouting and ranting and saying, "No Pope here." Poor Martha, she wasn't in the least bit shocked. But she was very much inclined to the nationalist side in the talks. The talks themselves, well, if they went on forevermore, we'd be all in the grave, no question or doubt about it. I don't do patience myself, and I found it very difficult to sit there day after tedious day, wondering what will happen next. And what happened finally, of course, was that there was an enormous breakthrough. I have to pay great tribute to yourself, Bertie, for your bravery and in the manner in which you met your poor mother's death, and how you came up and down even during the funeral. It was magnificent, and I think it was recognised as a huge sign of your courage in the circumstances, and they were terrible, terrible circumstances. Lord have mercy on your mother. But the other great thing about it was, Bertie, that you got on very, very well with Blair, and that was terribly, terribly important. I didn't like Blair. Blair tackled me one morning at about 3 o'clock, asking me where my dear friend Molan was. And I had told him I didn't know, and it wasn't my function to respond to that sort of question. If you had Mo Molan here, maybe she'd tell you where she was. But on the subject of Mo Molan, with whom I got on extremely well, was a wonderful, wonderful woman. She was a great character. As you know, she was suffering from a brain hemorrhage, and she wore a wig. And when she came into a room, she took the wig off, threw it on the table, and put her knees up on the table, and you wouldn't know where to look. But she was very courageous, and she went into, as you know, into prison to talk to the prisoners and to tell them what was on as far as they were concerned, and that was an act of bravery. She was a courageous woman, and she died soon after the end of the talks, tragically, from the illness from which she suffered, and which she endured with huge, as I say, courage during the talks. The talks themselves, well, to say the very least of it, the talks finally began to show some sign of coming to an end, and I think that at this stage George Mitchell was becoming impatient, and he had a hard time. He lost his child, as you know, but however, his wife became pregnant again, and his son, I think Andrew, was born. and he said that it would be wonderful at the time of the birth of his son, Andrew, that on the same day in Northern Ireland, 160 children were born, and that if we could give those children a legacy, and give Andrew a legacy in the context of the finality of the Good Friday Agreement and the negotiations thereof, it would be a huge, huge thing from any point of view. But anyway, he was becoming impatient, and he did something that I thought was quite unusual. He set a date for the conclusion of the talks, which was quite remarkable. But the other great thing about Mitchell was that he was independent, very, very independent. And he decided that the Thursday would be the day, Holy Thursday, for the want of a better word. Holy Thursday would be the day that the talks would conclude. But the talks concluded, as you know, late Friday afternoon. Consequently, the Belfast Agreement, I think you changed it to the Good Friday Agreement, if I'm not incorrect.
Correct.
Yes. And the talks themselves, I'll never forget that, those 3 or 4 days leading up to the finality of the talks. First of all, on the Wednesday and Thursday night, we were up all night, and people were trying to get to sleep. And I remember the night before the talks were finalised, one of the more prominent members, who shall remain nameless, pulling 2 seats together, falling asleep and falling off the chairs onto the floor. So that was the sort of atmosphere. People were tired. They wanted to get the thing done with. And I think that the most important person at that moment in time was Trimble. Trimble, he was really left on his own. He was coming and going, and his party, he didn't know whether they were with him or against him. And I think he was going to funk it, but he didn't. To his undying credit, I think that Blair and Clinton and yourself got in touch with him, but the phone call from Clinton, I think, persuaded him to do the deal, and he did. At the last moment, he did the deal, and consequently, we have the Good Friday Agreement. But there are many other memories of the Good Friday Agreement and the people who took part in them. I mean, for example, you'd wonder how you'd get on with the Unionists. They were a very strange crowd. They walked in and out of the talks like I don't know what. But I got very friendly with one of them, and he was probably he had a very bad record. It was Gusty Spence. Gusty and myself were great pals. And of course his record was outrageous. And the day the Good Friday Agreement concluded, he handed me his card, his personal card, which I unfortunately lost, and I was very, very upset about it. But I got an extraordinary one. And then when he died, I was in 2 minds as to whether I'd go to his funeral or not. But then I'd wonder how welcome I'd be. So I didn't probably have the guts to go to it, which is sad from any point of view. But they were the type of people that if you got to know them, I mean, they were okay, they were okay. So generally that would be a sort of a composite of my recollection of the Good Friday Agreement and the personalities involved in it.
25 years since the historic agreement, and as you say, recognised internationally, UN push it all the time as an agreement to look at around the world. 25 years on, I don't think either of us will be around to celebrate the 50th anniversary, but
you never know, Bertie. You have an extraordinary capacity for
bones are getting
doing things.
Bones are getting slower. But
Speaking for myself, no.
but your hopes, David.
They say about old age that it doesn't last very long.
Well, hopefully it will. But your hopes for what we have achieved and how you'd like to see it
I'd like
evolve, David.
well, I don't know. Evolve, of course, is the right question, the right description. But I think that the Good Friday Agreement is utterly there forever, and I can't see it being what's the word I'm looking for, but being adjusted or anything like that. And I think the Good Friday Agreement is there forever, and long may it last. I mean, look at after 25 years what it's done to the north of Ireland, and it's done for the north of Ireland. Hopefully it'll last, and last much longer than me, certainly, there's no question about that. And I think that for everybody's sake and for the sake of the island of Ireland, that the Good Friday Agreement will remain resolute and strong.